you ever have one of those goals that just feels so big, so completely out of reach, you don't even know where to start? Well, today we're going to dig into a really powerful way to tackle exactly those kinds of goals. And we're going to do it by following one of the most unbelievable stories of human endurance I have ever heard. Let's get right into it.
So picture this. You're at 28,000 feet on the summit ridge of Mount Everest. An explorer named Colin O'Brady is at his absolute breaking point. He can barely breathe, the wind chill is a brutal -60, and his body is just shutting down. And that's when the doubt, the fear, it all starts creeping in.
But here's the thing. The real battle wasn't against the ice and the wind. It was happening inside his own head. So how did he build the mental strength to keep going when every part of him screamed stop? Well, to get that answer, we actually have to jump back in time about 10 years, to a moment that almost destroyed him.
Yeah, let's rewind the tape, because the journey that led him to the top of the world didn't start at some high-altitude base camp. Nope, it all began in the last place you'd ever expect, a sterile hospital room in Thailand.
He was fresh out of college, on that big post-grad trip around the world. And then a freak accident with a flaming jump rope, yes, you heard that right, left him with severe burns all over his legs and feet. The physical pain was one thing, but the news from the doctors, that was the real gut punch.
I mean, this was it. Rock bottom. He was in a total downward spiral, just ready to give up. He was convinced his life, the life he'd planned, was completely over. Hope was just gone. But then his mom showed up, and she just wasn't having it.
She didn't buy into the doom and gloom. She walked into that hospital room every single day with this infectious smile, and instead of talking about the diagnosis, she dared him to think about the future. And she asked this one simple question that changed the entire trajectory of his life. What's something you want to do when you get out of here?
And right here, this is the secret sauce. This is the methodology. You start with a goal that seems laughably huge. For him, it was to compete in a triathlon. But then, and this is the key part, you shrink your focus down to the tiniest, most microscopic first step. For him, it wasn't swimming laps or going for a run. It was just getting his body out of the wheelchair and into a kitchen chair one step away. That one step, that became his entire universe.
So he had the method down, set a crazy big goal, then break it down into the smallest possible pieces. But now it was time to put it to the test. Could this actually work? Could he really go from not being able to walk to competing as an elite athlete? And look, this was no overnight success story. It was a grind. That one step to the chair became 5 steps, then 10. Weeks turned into months. He learned to walk again, then jog. For a year and a half, he just put his head down and did the work, one tiny step after another, always with that impossible triathlon goal shimmering in the distance. Then came the day of the Chicago Triathlon. He didn't just show up to participate. He didn't just finish the race. He won. The entire thing. First place. The guy who was told he might never walk properly again just beat more than 4,000 other athletes. It's just incredible. Now, the lesson he took from this is so important. It had nothing to do with physical limitations. He realized that we all have this huge well of potential deep inside of us, and usually, the only thing that's really stopping us is the story we tell ourselves in our own heads.
Okay, so what do you do once you've achieved the impossible? Well, if you're Colin, you go looking for an even bigger, crazier, impossible goal. He and his then-fiancée Jenna decided to take this one-step-at-a-time method and apply it to a global stage. And the goal they picked was just monumental. It's called the Explorer's Grand Slam. We're talking climbing the 7 summits, that's the highest peak on every single continent, plus skiing to both the North and South Poles. To put that in perspective, fewer than 50 people in all of human history had ever done this, and he wanted to do it faster than anyone ever had.
So for 100 straight days, he was just a machine. One expedition after another. Antarctica, check. South America, check. He was knocking them down one by one. 7 of the 9 brutal parts of the challenge were done, and then there was just a final boss waiting for him, Mount Everest.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We're back in the death zone, 28,000 feet up. He's freezing, exhausted, and that negative voice in his head is getting louder and louder. But this time is different. He has a tool that he forged back in that hospital in Thailand. At his absolute lowest point, terrified, he makes a call to his wife, Jenna. and her voice cuts right through all that fear. She reminds him of the real battle, the one in his mind. And those simple words were all it took. That was the spark he needed to get his boots on and step back out into that storm.
And you can almost see the switch flip in his brain. He recognized that negative voice asking, "Should I give up?" and he actively chose to listen to a different one. He leaned into the lesson his mom taught him. He stopped asking, "Can I do this?" and started asking, "How will I respond?" And he brought his focus down from the giant mountain to just one single thing, the very next step.
And with that mental shift, his body kind of did forget its weakness. He just kept going, one foot in front of the other, until suddenly there were no more steps to take. He was standing on top of the world. He'd done it.
But the story doesn't end there. He gets back to his tent, completely wiped out, and calls Jenna to celebrate. And instead of popping champagne, she says something that sounds completely insane. "Colin, I need you to put your boots back on."
See, Jenna had been crunching the numbers. She realized that if he could somehow get down Everest, get on a plane, fly halfway across the planet, and immediately start climbing Denali in North America, he could actually break a second world record. The timeline was absurd, just 100 hours to get from the summit of Everest to the base of Denali.
And somehow, he did it. He dug deep, wiped the slate clean, and battled through total exhaustion and a massive storm on Denali. On May 27, 2016, he stood on that final summit. He hadn't just set one world record, he had set two.
So look, this is an absolutely epic adventure story. But the real lesson here isn't about climbing mountains. It's about a simple, powerful idea that every single one of us can use for our own impossible goals.
You know, Colin actually carries a small rock he picked up from the top of Everest. It's a reminder. It symbolizes that any challenge, no matter how huge and overwhelming it feels, can be broken down. At the end of the day, even Mount Everest is just a really, really big pile of small rocks.
We all have our own mountains to climb, right? Maybe it's starting a business, or getting healthy, or just bouncing back from a tough time. The method is always the same. So what's your Mount Everest? What's that big, scary goal in front of you? And maybe more importantly, what's that one tiny chair, that one single step you can take today?